Hello everyone, I am Dr. Shikhar Kanti. In this video, we prove Lagrange's theorem, Euler's theorem, Fermat's theorem, and the consequences of Lagrange's theorem in group theory. This is the definition index of a subgroup. Index of a subgroup is nothing but if G is a group and H is a subgroup of G, then we have the cosets of H, right cosets and the left cosets. The number of distinct right cosets or the number of distinct left cosets is defined as the index of the subgroup. Okay, and we know that already we have proved that any two right cosets or any two left cosets are either identical or disjoint. No element is common in between two right cosets or two left cosets. So that means if I take the intersection of the right coset, the distinct right cosets or the distinct left coset, then that must be equal to the empty set because no element is common. And suppose A is an element belongs to G, then A belongs to HA. And suppose B is an element belongs to G, B belongs to HB. So that means here any element in general, say X belongs to G, then X belongs to one of the right coset or one of the left coset. So that means if I take the union of all the distinct right cosets or union of all the distinct left cosets is nothing but our group G. And number of elements in G is nothing but the number of elements in all the distinct right cosets. That is sum of the elements in all the distinct right cosets or all the distinct left cosets. We have the theorem. This is known as Lagrange's theorem. If G is a finite group and H is a subgroup of G, then order of H divides order of G. To prove this, let me take say order of G is equal to N and order of H is equal to M. And let me take these are the distinct right cosets, the HA1, HA2, HA3, HAK. These are distinct right cosets of H in G. And any two, these are all distinct. Therefore, if I take their union, then I must get it is equal to G. And if I take their intersection, I must get it is equal to pi. Okay. So that is G can be written as union of all these distinct right cosets. Then number of elements in G is nothing but number of elements of this plus number of elements of this plus number of elements of this plus number of elements of this. So that is order of G. N is equal to order of G. This can be written as order of HA1 plus order of HA2 plus order of HA3 plus order of HAK. And we know that order of HA1 is same as order of H. That is here H and HA consisting of the same number of elements. So therefore we write order of HA1 is equal to order of H, order of HA2 equal to order of H, order of HA3 equal to order of H, and order of HA equal to that is also order of H. That is totally we have on the right side order of H plus order of H plus order of H up to k times. This can be written as k into order of H. So that is we got here order of G can be written as an integer into order of H, means order of H is a divisor of order of G. That is order of H divides order of G. This is known as the Lagrange's theorem. Now some consequences are there. If A is any element of a finite group G, then order of A divides order of G. Okay, so G is a finite group here. A is any element of G and therefore A has its order. Then its order, that is order of A, must divide order of G. So for this, let me take an element here. Say A is any element of G and let me consider order of A is equal to N. And if I consider this set here, H is equal to say A square, A cube up to A to the power of N. And A raised to N is equal to E because we have order of A is equal to N. And these are all distinct elements here. So that is here H is a set consisting of totally N elements because no two elements are same here. That is all the elements of this are distinct because order of A is equal to N. So that is H consisting of totally N elements here. And here if you observe that all these elements of H can be obtained by taking the powers on A. So that is here elements of H are powers of A. Therefore H is a cyclic group generated by A. So that means H is a subgroup of G. If H is a subgroup of G, then by Lagrange's theorem, order of H divides order of G. Okay. So that is here, order of H is equal to N. N divides order of G. Okay. So what is our N here? N is nothing but order of A. So that is here, order of A divides order of G. Okay. Next example. Show that every group of prime order is cyclic. That is a group having a prime number of elements, say 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19. So these are all cyclic groups. Let me consider. Let G be a group of prime order, say P, and let A is any element of G. Let me consider A is any element of G. Then, by previous example, we have order of A divides order of G. This implies order of A divides, here order of G is nothing but P. As P is a prime, therefore P is divisible by only 1 and P itself. And here we have taken A is any element here, therefore order of A must be is equal to P. Because P is divisible by only 1 and P itself, therefore order of A equal to P. So that is here, G is a group of order P and there is an element A whose order is also equal to P. Then one of our theorem, already we have proved, this proves that G is cyclic. So that theorem is here. See, this is the theorem. Let G be a finite group of order n containing an element of order n. Then show that G is a cyclic group generated by A. This theorem number 28. Okay, so here we have G is a finite group of order P and there is an element A whose order is also equal to P. This implies this G is a cyclic group. Next example. If A is any element of a finite group G of order n, then A to the power of n is equal to A to the power of order of G is equal to E. So that is if G is a group of order something, and if A is any element of G, then A to the power of that order always equal to E. So here, let me take order of A is equal to M. Then by the definition of the order of an element, we have A power of M equal to E. And already we have proved that order of A divides order of G. This result already we have proved. Order of A divides order of G. What is order of A? This is equal to M we have taken. What is order of G? This is equal to N. So M divides N means N can be written as an integer into M. So that is N is equal to M into K. I have to prove this here. So consider this A power of N equal to N is nothing but MK. And this can be written A to the power of M to the power of K. But what is A to the power of M? It is equal to E. So that is here we have E to the power of K. As E is the identity element, E to the power of K equal to E itself. So finally we have proved that A to the power of N is equal to E. A to the power of order of the group is always equal to the identity element. Next, one more example. Show that a group of prime order has no proper subgroup. What do you mean by proper subgroup and improper subgroups? If G is a finite group, G is any group, and E is the identity element of G, and this set consisting of only the identity element E is a group. So that is E is the subgroup of G. And we have G is the subset of G itself. So therefore, G itself is the subgroup of G. That is the subgroup E and subgroup G itself are known as the improper subgroups of G. And if there is any other subgroup of G other than these two, then those subgroups are known as the proper subgroups. Here I have to prove that a group of prime order has no proper subgroup. That is only E and G itself. That I have to prove. So let G be a group of prime order P and let H be a subgroup of G. Then by Lagrange's theorem, order of H divides order of G. Okay. So that is, this implies order of H divides order of g is equal to p here. As p is a prime, then p is divisible by only 1 and p itself. That means order of h equal to 1 or order of h equal to p. If order of h equal to 1 means h consisting of only one element, that is nothing but the identity element. So that is h equal to e. If p equal to, if order of h equal to p means h consisting of all the elements of g. So then order of h equal to p, therefore h is equal to g. So that therefore this shows that g has no proper subgroups. Euler's theorem. A statement is, if n is any positive integer and a is relatively prime to n, then a power of pi n is congruent to 1 mod n. Pi n is the pi function here. That is, pi n is pi function. That means this is nothing but the number of integers less than n relatively prime to n is known as pi of n. Okay. Let me consider one set here: 1, R1, R2, R3, R pi n minus 1 be the set of integers less than n and relatively prime to n. So these are all the integers here which are less than n, and these are relatively prime to n. And we know that this set forms a group with respect to multiplication modulo n. Okay. So that is, and this consists of totally 1, 2, 3, pi n minus 1 plus 1. That is totally pi n elements are there. That is, order of g is equal to pi n, and this is a group with respect to multiplication modulo n. So that is order of g equal to pi n. And given that a comma n is equal to 1 here, it is given here a is relatively prime to n. A is relatively prime to n, therefore a must be an element of this a. So that is a belongs to g. If a belongs to g, then already we have proved that a to the power of order of g equal to the identity element. So therefore we can write a to the power of order of g is equal to identity in this multiplication model is 1. Okay. So a to the power of order of g is equal to 1. And this implies, what is order of g here? It is nothing but pi n. So we have got a power of pi n is equal to 1. Now we have 1 is congruent to 1 mod n, that is n divides 1 minus 1, n divides 0, that is n divides 1 minus 1, therefore we can write 1 is congruent to 1 mod n. And here we have 1 is equal to a power of pi n, so I will replace this 1 by a power of pi n here, so that is a power of pi n is congruent to 1 mod n. So this is our Euler's theorem. Next we have Fermat's theorem. This theorem is, if p is a prime number and a is any integer, then a power of p is equal to a mod p. Okay. Now first I will consider, if p is a prime number, then pi of p equal to p minus 1. That means the the number of integers which are less than p and relatively prime to p. If p equal to prime, say 5 is there, then how many integers are relatively prime to 5? 1 is relatively prime to 5, 2, 3, 4, totally 4. And suppose if I take p equal to 7 here, then all 1 to 6 are relatively prime to 7. Similarly, if we take 11, then all 1 to 10, that is to 10 integers, are all relatively prime to 11. In general, if p is a prime, all those integers 1, 2, 3, 4 up to p minus 1, so these are all relatively prime to p, so therefore pi of p equal to p minus 1. Now let me consider case 1. Let a comma, we consider two cases here, a comma p equal to 1, a comma p not equal to 1. First case, let a comma p equal to 1, then already we have proved I by Euler's theorem. Euler's theorem, a to the power of pi of p is congruent to 1 mod p. Okay. What is this pi p? Pi p is nothing but p minus 1 here. So that is, this implies a to the power of p minus 1 congruent to 1 mod p. Now for congruence relation we can multiply by same quantity here. I will multiply by a here. Left hand side becomes a to the power of p. Right hand side becomes p into 1, that is p a mod p. I am multiplying by a on both the sides here. A to the power of p minus 1 into a raised to p. This is 1 into a, that is equal to a. So a raised to p congruent to a mod p. So in this first case, we have proved this result. Case 2. Suppose a comma p is not equal to 1. So that means here a and p are not relatively prime. The greatest common divisor in this case is not equal to 1, which is greater than say 1. There is a common divisor, and as p is a prime, therefore the common divisor must be equal to p here. So that is here. And a cannot divide p, therefore p must divide a. So that is p divides a. If p divides a, then that we write here p divides a means p divides a minus 0. Then by congruence relation we can write a is congruent to 0 mod p. Right? A congruent to 0 mod p. P divides a, or we can write p divides a minus 0 we can write. Then we can write a congruent to 0 mod p. So that is, this implies. And for the congruence relation we can take the powers. A congruent to b mod a means a raised to m congruent to b raised to m mod. Okay. So that we can raise the powers here. So left hand side power raising a to the power p. Right hand side 0 is there. Therefore this remains as it is. A raised to p congruent to 0 mod p. I will take this as a 1. And also here we have p divides a. That means here p divides a minus 0. If p divides a minus 0, then we can write a is congruent to 0 mod p. Okay. So that is here. Okay. If and here this relation is symmetry. This is an equivalence relation. Therefore, a congruent to 0 mod p can be written as 0 congruent to a mod p. So that is, this implies 0 congruent to a mod p. I will take this as a 2. A raised to p is congruent to 0 mod p is 1, and 0 is congruent to a mod p. And the relation congruence mod is an equivalence relation. Okay. So that means it is a transit relation. A congruent to b mod n, b congruent to c mod n implies that a congruent to c mod n. So we have a raised to p congruent to 0 mod p, and 0 is congruent to a mod p. Therefore we can write a raised to p is congruent to a mod p. So the from 1 and 2 we can write here. So from 1 and 2 we can write a to the power of p is congruent to a mod p. This is the Fermat's theorem. Okay, thank you.